Okay, so this is my experimentation week evaluation. So this is kind of everything I've been up to this week in terms of experimenting with my practical. Um, so the first thing I prototyped was just getting some cinematic bars in to my game. Um, so basically, when you press this button, the cinematic bars come up and down. Now, originally I did have a problem with this, where basically what happened was I was trying to use a different behavior. I was trying to use um, the add X and add Y, so it was like a different action. But instead, I started using the bullet behavior, and basically it just hits this and stops. Then when it runs on a boolean, and then when the boolean changes, it goes up to there and then stops when it hits another thing, and it just switches between that and this button here obviously toggles the boolean. So yeah, then I wanted to kind of add some effects to my game. So I started off by adding just a couple of different effects. I also wanted to see what this looked like up against the cinematic bars. I also added an object here just to see what it kind of looked like with the sprites. So I used the pre-made a pre-made game basically, which had like a TV filter. I edited some of the effects that it had on the layout. I also also deleted some of them as well, and I got this kind of like CCTV footage kind of look to it. I was happy with the result, but it wasn't quite there yet. I also wanted to see like what it looked like without the effects, just to see whether I should even bother with this in the end game. Um, and here it is, just like the textures by themselves. They look alright. I then decided to look at multiple effects with the textures as well, just to get a kind of an idea for how it would look actually in the game once it's finished. So here you go, you got the filter over the actual textures themselves, giving me a bit of a better idea of what it's actually going to look like. It looked quite cool. So yeah, I was quite happy with that in the end. I then also wanted to have a look at other plugin effects, because obviously it's another way of approaching it, and it's less effects that I have to worry about on the layout. This is what it looked like in the end. So it kind of gave it like a bloody look, a darker look, but it didn't look as impressive as the other stuff. And honestly, it was more of a fiddle to actually download and implement into the game, and there was problems with files if like I didn't have the plugin installed on all the places I access my construct account from. So I decided to go against it in the end, and so I will be sticking with the multiple effects up the top there. So then I was looking at movement systems. So here's my movement system. This is the first movement system I worked on. Now this one used pathfinding. The problem with pathfinding is, as you'll see, it does get to the different places, but unfortunately it takes a while and then it goes. So I couldn't really deal with that. So I had to find another way around it. So here I worked on another type. So basically it used another object below it that's invisible, that sets angle towards it, that moves forward towards the position of the tapped area, and then the actual player itself is pinned to that object, so it moves with it. I also made it so it kind of like, if you tap somewhere else whilst it's mid movement, which the player will be doing a lot, because obviously they want to move around easier, you can also do that, and it deletes the last tap and it moves towards it, and it feels very natural. In my surveys, people have been asking for touch controls, so like HUD touch controls, basically like having like arrows that they tap in order to move. So I did this as well. I just experimented with it. Basically, just same as I did the cinematic bars. I did with this originally. So it just adds to X every time I want to move up, minuses to X every time I want to go down, minuses to Y every time I want to go left, adds to Y every time I want to go right. Hold it down. It moves quite naturally. The only problem with this is I feel like it'll be quite fiddly with fingers, especially on smaller devices, and it's a lot easier to tap somewhere wherever they want to go. So in the end, I think I'm going to go with the other one as well. With the other one, I'm no longer using pathfinding, so my aim is changed slightly, but it's because I've found out and realised through this experimentation that it's not the best way to go. Although I still will be, the aim also does involve enemy movement and projectiles, which as you'll see in a minute, I have implemented into the game, or at least experimented with at the moment. So now I'm looking at my camera movement. So my first camera movement prototype is here. So it's just moving around. Each one moves to the room, and it also sort of scrolls to the player when they're inside the room as well. So then I also tried another version of this. But instead of changing when it goes to the rooms, it's just using the scroll to behavior. I just wanted to see what it looked like. But yeah, it didn't look as good as the one from the tutorial I followed. But then I realised after following that tutorial, firstly I had to edit that heavily because I needed to change the values. So I had to understand the code they put in and edit that slightly. But then after I realised that for tap movements, they can't actually, unless they're using the final movement system, they won't actually be able to carry on tapping off the screen in order to get to the next room if I do use that camera. So I had to come up with a system in this version of the camera movement system. Well, basically what happened is now it moves around just as normal. Then when they want to get to here, it kind of moves their character to the right when they're walking through the left door here, till they get to about this point here. And then same as if I click on here now, it moves it forward here. So this basically just means, because if that wasn't there, they can't actually click here in order to get here, so they'll just be stuck at the door there. So I had to make sure it gave them that extra push, and it does feel natural. It does feel like that's what you want to do, and it doesn't move you too far over here, so it doesn't feel like the player's lost control. And at any point, they can also continue moving as well. So you know, it doesn't take away from any of the movement that the player can do, but at the same time, there's no glitches and everything works out. I've tried to break it, and so far it hasn't, so that's good. So now I was experimenting with cutscenes. So I was doing some triggered events. So this is kind of like an intro sequence, and I was just experimenting. So this is what it turned out like. I used cinematic bars and everything as well. So I had the text fade in and out to triggers. Had the camera move along from a sprite, and the sprite was actually triggering all these triggers when it collided with the collision boxes on these, as well as obviously for the title, which is coming up now. I also did put the filter over as well, just to give it the proper game feel. And then there's also a triggered event when this is faded in, that actually starts, and then it all goes again. So yeah, and then it will beat the game. I also had then experimented with the fog. I got it from here. It was a free to use image. I had to edit it so it wasn't as harsh around the edges, so it actually looked natural. But this is what it turned out like with the fog as well, you can faintly see. It moves slightly faster than the camera movement, which looks really cool on the text. I followed a YouTube tutorial and then edited it slightly for my needs because it was like different sizing and stuff and different textures I used compared to them. And there you go. So it's the same as the other one, just with the fog that I experimented around with. And I'm now going to survey and see what the players prefer more, whether the fog's too much or whether they prefer it, and that will also influence what kind of the end game will look like actually in game as well. So now I experimented from these triggered events. I actually learned a bit more about like timelines on construct and stuff. So then I figured out how to do a interactable NPC. So you can walk around as normal. It's got the pixelated filter of this one, so I didn't actually have to do any pixel art. It kind of worked normally. And then cut bars come in, and then there's a bit of text that goes. It waits a couple of seconds, then you can continue and carry on as normal after the cutscene's finished. But then during the cutscene, you can't move. So yeah. After that, I worked on pathfinding systems for the NPCs. So this is my first attempt at it. These are some enemies. So in the first room here, you got an enemy that follows you. You then also have an enemy that comes at you with a gun, and when he gets in a certain range, he shoots at you. Now with the player speed like this, you can see it feels very bulky and slow, and you can't really avoid the bullets or the players, or the NPCs, which means you're losing health really fast. So two things I did to tackle this was I improved the speed of the player, as well as adding higher health to the player. So that's what this came to. So it's a lot more faster movement now. I think the more health was on the next level, but now you can, if the player taps correctly, they don't lose health as easily. They can easily run away and avoid projectiles. So even though they're on a touchscreen display, they still have that like agility, which they didn't quite have with like the lower speeds and stuff. Then I decided to add some different types of enemy movements. So I already had one that comes up to you quite close and attacks you, another one that kind of comes near to you and it stops, and I thought I'd have a couple of static ones that like kind of hide behind cover and stuff like that, make it a bit more realistic because not everyone just runs at you. So the first one I did was quite basic. It was basically the same as the second NPC you saw, just it didn't move, and it also hid behind cover. So when you do get the ability to attack in this game, so here's more health as well, so you can avoid these. He had to like come behind him. You have to kind of like sneak your way around without getting hit, which is doable. And yeah, but it's also quite realistic in the sense that more than likely he will take one health away from you or something. That's why I added more health to you, because it's kind of inevitable you might lose one health, but that's kind of realistic because if someone's got a gun and you walk up to them, it's more than likely you're going to take a little bit of damage. But I will add a system where after you kill him, he drops like a bandage or something, so you gain health back. So you know, as long as you kill him in enough time, you don't lose more than one health, you should be back at the normal health you're meant to be at. I then found that quite boring, so I also wanted to obviously have that in the game, but then add like another variation of that. So this one here is a guided missile. So he doesn't spawn it all the time. It kind of comes close to you, and you can outrun it like I just did there. But it also does come and shoot at you as well. It does take more health away from you than the others because they're obviously guided missiles. So quite, but you can outrun it, and it does destroy itself in 3 seconds. So it does give the player a fair chance throughout the game. And then finally, I decided that one there's quite OP, so you only see it like once or twice. So there needs to be like a kind of variation of this that occurs and appears more often than the guided missile, but at the same time, I can put in a lot more with the other one and not make it too OP on the player. So this one here is a shotgun, and he does actually run after you. But yeah, he shoots a shotgun at you. He gets quite close and he shoots. It is quite easy to avoid, but obviously at close distance he can do quite a lot of damage. Each bullet does do damage to you, so you can lose 3 health every time he shoots. But sometimes he only hits you like 1 or 2, so there you go, hit me with 2 there. Hit me all 3, lose all 3. So you want to kind of stay away from him and then get in like when he's about to reload and then just shoot him or kill him. And yeah, so that's basically all my prototyping done. Now it's kind of putting it all into the game and fitting it around the story. I have got prototypes for my story, which I'll show you in a second. But yeah, apart from that, it's kind of now a process for the next 2 weeks of combining it all together and then fitting it into the story. I've decided not to do level design, which was one of my last aim, which I haven't really prototyped at all, until actual game testing, because through a lot of research and asking a lot of game devs and people, they've all suggested that the only way you can really tell the difference between good and bad level design and work out whether the player's actually going to enjoy it is just through playtesting, which I will be doing throughout the whole process of making my actual game itself. So I feel like at the moment it would be a waste of time to prototype different level design, and instead just make some level design and then obviously edit it as people play, because every game like gets changed loads since it gets changed loads throughout its development. So yeah, that's why I haven't done it for my practical experimentation week. So I'll quickly record what I did for my story, and yeah, that'll be it for the first devlog of this project. Okay, so here's the script that I've kind of made. Well, not script, but kind of like the action plan for like how I'm going to approach the story and the kind of direction it's going to take. So I've kind of done 2 different paths. I'm going to try and through surveys work out what people like about each one, what they don't like, maybe combine them or just choose like one of the main ones. So the status is always the same. It because I did use the 8-point story arc, which I researched during my research stage of the project. So the status is the player's in a coma and they cannot move. So the first trigger is that the player has a device attached to their brain, which leads to them having the ability to control a robot that's external to their body. But even though they're in the coma, they're actually able to control this robot, and the player is the robot even though they're not physically the robot. The second one is that they actually get put in a mech suit, so they're actually like within the robot sort of. And they gain control of their body once again, basically, because it's attached to their brain and the brain's still awake even though their body can't be moved. So the first quest will be that they have to work out how to escape the evil experimentation center, because the kind of thing is like that it's like an experiment, and they've kind of been put against their will in order to be kind of experimented on for this, and it's worked. So yeah, or the second one is work out how they got into the coma in the first place through a series of hints and puzzles, getting more like mystery game kind of feel to it, and puzzle game feel. So the first surprise will be that the player becomes friends with an NPC, which becomes their sidekick, so it might be like an enemy that actually turns out to be nice after a player interaction, and then you can kind of form that bond, which I've looked into quite a lot, which is quite nice.
The next, the player finds out that they were captured and forced to be used as a guinea pig for the scientists to experiment on with the new inventions. So that would be pretty cool for like they've worked out the puzzle and it turns out that they've found some kind of logbook or some diary and it's kind of briefly said that. So the first critical choice that the player may face is that the player has a choice between sacrificing their sidekick in order to make the challenge easier, or not sacrifice their sidekick, but then getting more of a challenge. But they will be able to face the challenge with the sidekick, so it's kind of like up to them. But also there should be like a bond there, so it kind of brings attachment to the player and the NPC. Second critical choice is the player is faced with the option to choose their approach for the rest of the game, so whether they're going to go aggressive or quiet. So yeah, it's going to be kind of like one of them sort of like rerunnable games, so you can approach the game in different ways with that one. The climax one will be that there's a boss battle where the player just before killing the boss gets told what actually happened to them, and then the boss like dies straight after, and I feel like it's going to go in a direction where the boss was actually trying to be good the whole time, sort of thing. The second climax is there's a boss guarding the door when you're trying to escape, but he's blocking the exit, so you have to defeat him. So in the first reversal is that the player's character tries to save the boss after finding out that the boss was actually the good guy all along, and you kind of work out that the player was actually kind of the bad guy, but they do choose to be good after like what they've been through throughout the whole story. So it's kind of like showing how the characters developed and how they've changed for the better. The second reversal is that the player has realised that the other scientists are in danger, as they were actually working on the experimentation against their will, and it was just the boss that was kind of like putting them through it. So he kind of, instead of like putting himself first and escaping, he goes back to save them. So it kind of shows that he's kind of like evolved further than just like putting himself first. So he's, after going through that journey and building bonds with people, he's decided, you know, like it's worth looking after these people. So the resolution one, there'll be a cutscene of the player paying respects to their boss by visiting the grave after they're out their coma. So they kind of like realised the situation and realised, you know, how bad it was, and they're kind of trying to do their best to like pay respects and be good about it. And the resolution 2, after saving the scientists, they become the boss themselves. They kind of change how the experimentation slash like kind of like the company that like the company that kind of like run these experimentations work, and it's kind of like better. It's more like legal and yeah, nicer for the actual public and everyone. So yeah, I think both stories kind of have like good aims to them. I feel like there needs to be a combination of both in some cases though. Like I feel like there needs to be sort of a sidekick, but at the same time maybe the player does get the sidekick, but then also they do find out that as well at the same time, so maybe some of them could be combined and some bits can just be crossed out completely. But I'll see what people say through a focus group or something, and yeah, see how development goes after that.